the legitimacy and worth of the path you're on is not invalidated by imperfection, nor is it validated by perfection. This is the most ridiculous document of which I'm in possession. It is a fully paid scholarship to attend the University of Cambridge for a PhD in philosophy. Now, let me put this into context for you. 12 years ago, I dropped out of high school with anorexia and bulimia. Given how far I've come in these last 12 years, I feel it is incumbent upon me to empower people who are now where I was. People who thought they had or have completely screwed up their education, not to mention their lives and the lives of everybody they care about and cares about them. In fact, my journey has been so total and radical that I can't not share with you what lies beyond an eating disorder. And I don't mean just settling for some humdrum happiness. I mean going out and motherfucking conquering. Living without an illness is obviously a huge achievement, but things don't have to stop there. And what I want to emphasize is that a bigger, more inspiring goal can get you to and beyond the primary goal of overcoming your eating disorder. In my mind, the most inspiring and horizon-broadening part of recovery is the prospect of living without limitations, especially pursuing goals that you never thought were reasonable or safe, irrespective of your eating disorder. And thinking back, when I was a depressed anorexic teenager, there was nothing on YouTube that showed me what lay beyond an eating disorder. What could I hope for? What may I wish for? The only message I was getting at the time was how badly, completely and utterly I had fucked up my life. Many of you may have wondered what exactly happened in the intervening years between being an anorexic school dropout to being on a full PhD scholarship at the University of Cambridge. Well, if you watch till the end, you will see how I basically turned my life around 180 and then some. Also, if you want to follow my continuing journey through my PhD, please like, subscribe, and ding dang dong the notification bell, so that you can actually find out when I've posted fresh hot content. Otherwise it will disappear into the ether. When I dropped out of high school in 2007 with anorexia and bulimia, I was paradoxically really lucky because I was fast-tracked through the NHS's clinical psychology waitlist and found myself in the more than capable hands of my therapist, Sally. I don't know quite how she did it, but Sally changed my life forever, and I think about her almost every single day. Sally rebuilt me from being a psychological, devastated train wreck to somebody with the resources and strength to take on life again. And a huge motivator to actually embrace her help was to get into view what I'd always wanted from life, and that was an education. I don't just mean any education, I mean a rich, liberal arts education. Part of what made pursuing an education so frightening was that I became anorexic, partly because of what I perceived to be my academic failures and shortcomings. From the age of about 15, I'd wanted to become a dentist, or rather that was what my parents wanted for me, and I consistently fell short of achieving the high standards in the sciences that would actually make that dream a reality. But these unsuccesses in the sciences weren't due to being stupid, as I really truly believed back in 2007. I mean, I'd been shortlisted for the chemistry prize in year 12, I'd always been in the top set for science, and I'd even beaten my then boyfriend in our exams, and he later became a dentist. So I don't think incompetence was really the problem. The problem was that my heart wasn't in this dental dream. Becoming a dentist wasn't my fantasy. Yes, it was undergirded by a fantasy of finally being acceptable to my parents. I was always an approval-obsessed child, and that made bending myself to the mold of parental approval absolutely irresistible. So basically, I was a square peg being psychologically coerced by myself and what I thought were the expectations of others into a round hole, to the extent that I just couldn't even stay sane. The subliminal message that I got from my upbringing was that people in certain kinds of careers, pursuing certain kinds of things, namely hard and medical sciences, accorded a great deal of socio-cultural approval. For perspective, my mother has a maths degree, my brother was doing a physics degree, and my dad is obsessed with engineering. Meanwhile, artsy-fartsy me loved poetry and painting and philosophy, and my fucking god, I had a beret collection. In short, I was an unbelievably creative soul who felt completely unable to accept this core facet of my identity. I felt like my interests were completely worthless and accorded no social approval. I thought they were gonna lead me to a job with no income. Since nobody else seemed to esteem these parts of my character and my interests, I put two and two together and lost esteem for myself, who actually manifested these tendencies. So as I became more and more painfully aware that I wasn't going to breeze my way into dental school, I consciously and unconsciously began to self-sabotage in the most basic way possible. I stopped eating. It didn't help that I'd also been bullied for years about my body and my image, so thinness was a double whammy. You might be wondering why I didn't just pursue something that interested me. And the truth is that pursuing something that interested me felt so sickening and unacceptable that I jettisoned all of my creative dreams and slowly started compromising, or rather killing myself, with anorexia. And this anorexic and bulimic downward spiral was intentional to the extent that there was a kind of relief in knowing that I wouldn't have to fail in someone else's dream for me. Anyway, fast forward a year in and out of hospital in Sally's capable hands. I'd made such progress with my recovery that I was able to have another stab at my pre-university education. Now, I was still absolutely terrified of failure, so I didn't really aim so highly when I first applied to university. This is because failing at becoming a dentist was actually a milder form of failure than failing at something I actually wanted. So I held myself back and applied to only one university, King's College London. But by the end of my undergrad, I had seen the value of taking risks, and I decided I would apply to both Oxford and Cambridge for my master's programme. I got onto both programmes, and after completing my undergrad with straight firsts and coming top of the year, I went to Oxford for my master's in philosophy. Now, my family were very proud of all of this. Rightly or wrongly, my perception was that finally pursuing my liberal arts educational dream was only made acceptable by finally studying at prestigious institutions. In my mind, having a daughter at Oxbridge felt like a trade-off for having a dentist for a daughter. But what I wanted wasn't more conditional approval, this time conditioned upon where I was at university. I wanted somebody to acknowledge the intrinsic value that I saw and knew existed in moral philosophy, and the value that existed in me, by extension, as somebody manifesting the capabilities to contribute something to this field. Not the extrinsic value and vain glamour of having sent a daughter to Oxbridge, never mind a formerly anorexic daughter. I digress. My master's was by no means a breeze. Nevertheless, I finished with a distinction in my thesis, and to boot, I had an offer to study the PhD in philosophy at Cambridge University, and an offer to stay at Oxford if I so chose. Now, I chose Cambridge because somebody told me that it was full of normal nerds, contra Oxford, which is full of pathological nerds, and that was a cheering prospect. Anyway, it wasn't just the fact that Cambridge was full of normal nerds. Cambridge had actually offered me 3 scholarships for the PhD in philosophy. Motherfucking shook. The amount of self-overcoming that I have achieved in the last 12 years genuinely boggles my mind. If somebody had told me when I was anorexic that I would someday be being paid by one of the best universities in the world to work on something that nourishes every moral and intellectual fibre of my being, I would have told them they were talking a load of bollocks. It's not that I didn't precisely envision this being my future. I didn't envision a future at all. And more to the point, this was a fantasy that I didn't even dare to dream. Going for something that I actually wanted and cared about felt so unsafe. I thought that I would disappoint my parents once and for all, and that I would completely destroy any possibility of being valued by them. This made me feel so chillingly vulnerable, because I was saying to my parents, and by extension the world, which I thought was just an extrapolation of my parents, that I didn't care what they thought, and that I didn't care what they wanted for me, because I finally realized that their values were in the wrong place. Pursuing my own creative educational dreams was gonna have to be a risk that I would shoulder completely on my own. And if these dreams hadn't worked out, I would have had to concede to everybody maybe that they were right, risking wholesale humiliation if I were to fail. But I've had rejection, and they weren't humiliating. Between today and anorexia, there have been loads of setbacks. I didn't win every piece of funding I applied for. I didn't get every prize I was nominated for. I didn't come top of the year at Oxford. And I've lost friendships because of my social anxiety disorder, for which I'm still in therapy. But these things are okay. The truth is that nobody will think you're a failure because you've not done everything perfectly. That's actually a fault of this black and white thinking that plagues people with a history of eating disorders. It turns out that the legitimacy and worth of the path you're on is not invalidated by imperfection, nor is it validated by perfection. If anything, those bumps in the road are stepping stones towards something better, and they sure as hell make you stronger. In short, embracing what I could of that fraying educational thread back in 2008 came a rope with which I pulled myself out of my eating disorder as if my life depended on it. And it did. It enabled me to pull myself out of my eating disorder completely. And to extend the metaphor, I hope this video tosses you a rope to pull yourself out of that dark, sad, lonely, an impossible place. I am not perfect, my life is not perfect, but with the little power that I actually have, I want to throw people a lifeline and paint a picture that isn't a fantasy. It can be your reality. I never thought that any of this would be possible for me, and I thought that a document like this was a pipe dream. Also, can we just stick a massive finger up to other people and their fucking expectations? Honestly guys, life is too fucking short to live for other people. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with anybody you think needs to hear this message. For me personally, a message like this would have had such a massive impact on me all those years ago, and I might have been able to drag myself out of my eating disorder a bit quicker had I had any kind of inkling of what could lie ahead for me. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you all very soon. Cheers.